to talk about all the changes in the ADA, then I think I have an obligation to talk about the challenges that, and I'll be quite specific, challenges that people with disabilities have to confront. And like so many things, when I try to explain things to people, there's always a story to tell. Well, as much of a positive effect, and I suppose there are some people who would disagree with me, but I would challenge them, that the Me Too movement has had, because of the large number of sexual assaults, domestic abuses that even especially prior to that go uninvestigated. They don't interview the victims. Well, those statistics are even more sad for especially women and young women with developmental disabilities and other disabilities. The numbers are very, very large, well over 70% that women in some way will be a victim of sexual harassment, abuse, assault, domestic assault that go unprosecuted, uncharged. And I start on a negative note, but I'm going to get very positive. So because of that, and again because of the education I'd received from the Colleen Wicks of the world, and especially all the people with disabilities, the Karens of the world, we decided during these CLEs for elimination of bias credits, so I've been discussing, we decided that 2 years ago, because we should bring in somebody instead of Karen, someone who we knew had been a victim of sexual assault, no prosecution, wasn't ever interviewed. So we put Katie, first name was Katie, on the panel with me. We met beforehand, and you could have heard a pin drop for the half hour plus that she and I discussed that no one would interview her, no one would investigate the case because they viewed her as somebody who wouldn't be competent. And you see, this brought back a lot of things for me, in addition to educating lawyers, and I'll get to be very specific about that, on the obstacles that are being addressed finally. What I haven't mentioned is that when I was my first job out of law school way back in 1977, going up to the Iron Range, I didn't know how active St. Louis County was with their sexual assault advocates and domestic abuse advocates. So they'd look for ignorant, and I went up as a young prosecutor, they'd look for ignorant lawyers like me and hope they had an open mind. I was being trained and sensitized the whole time on a number of issues. I didn't see it as training at the time, and a number of issues, including judge, young lawyer Frank, you can't assume that just because somebody has a disability, they're not competent to testify. So the last few years I was a prosecutor, I did all the sexual assault prosecutions. I had a number of I would insist that law enforcement would investigate and interview everybody. And so I never had one young girl or woman, young or old, with a significant developmental disability who was not competent to testify, because many of them went to trial. I got convictions in almost every one, and sometimes if we didn't, it didn't have anything to do with their disability. It had to do, I think, or with their competence, had to do with sometimes a double standard that may still exist between women and men on those issues. But when Katie was then moving up, because I got educated and trained back then, and so I to this day would challenge anybody that said, well, our excuse was they're not competent or not this or not that. Well, when Katie explained the lack of respect shown to her, that they had made these unfair stereotypes, well, You want to talk about the difference that's made. We have city attorneys, county attorneys who invited all of us to speak, and with the help of a couple of elected county attorneys who've been on our panels too, one of whom was Jim Backstrom from Dakota County, who's was with us in a number of cases, and also Greg Brooker from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and a number of others. There's an annual city attorney and annual county attorney seminar. They invited us to come and speak about, let's talk about the lack of investigation and prosecution where the alleged victim is a person with a disability, especially if it's a young girl or woman. And it's really opened the eyes of a lot of people. We've made a lot of progress. We have still a long way to go. But again, it's people with disabilities and those challenges that now, because they didn't remain silent, we now have more people participating. We could probably go back and look. I haven't done the careful study. But the idea that they have one annual conference a year, and they invited us as a panel to talk and focus on disability discrimination issues in investigations, prosecutions. Incredible. I mean, it was kind of the first time we got invited not once, not twice, and we also got invited to the State Attorney General's office to do the same thing because the word kind of spread. And so then, as other people heard about it, then they started inviting us and the Katies of the world. And I think a lot of people had to sit back then, as I did, and say, whoa, yes, these have been going uninvestigated, unprosecuted. And so, yes, we've come a long ways. We've got a long ways to go yet. But those have been some very significant challenges that I've seen addressed now. Just like to address another challenge, we wanted to address some assumptions, stereotypes with the employment issue, because one of the things that Karen would say at her seminars, I want not only a job where I can use my brain, I want a job where I can be a fair wage, paid a fair wage too. Mm-hmm. And so I think those are areas now that let's just put it this way: it's more difficult for people because of how the system, but thanks to people with disabilities, have met this challenge. It's more difficult for them to either plead ignorance or to carry around these unfair stereotypes, or try to use lack of competency or understanding as a reason not to investigate and prosecute. And also, what it's done has then increased the training for lawyers, for not just lawyers, judges, investigators, law enforcement. So then you have to not make assumptions about people, and please, you're not going to use the R word, retarded. How dare you? That is not something we want to hear. And so yes, I think those have been the challenges, and we got a ways to go, but they are being met. And again, thanks to, and I guess I'd like to tell you, it was my idea to bring a young woman who'd been a victim that nobody would listen to onto our CLE panels, but somebody else approached me and said, well, we hardly ever hear as all the positive effects as the Me Too movement has had. We almost never hear anything about, well, how about this disproportionate effect on young girls and women with disabilities? And so, again, it was people with disabilities in the disability world who approached us and said, it's time we address this issue as well. And so we did, with also the panel members who talked about it and how they were going to try to sensitize themselves, educate themselves. And so, yes, it's a challenge along with employment and other issues, but I believe that progress is being made.